Okay, now, if you're a fan of these things, what I'm about to say is probably going to upset you.
Now, you don't have to look too hard to find a big long laundry list of all of the problems these things have. But in saying that, there are millions of them still on the road, and some of them have got ridiculously high Ks.
Look, it just feels invincible to drive. Okay, yes, we all know Toyota have this amazing reputation for reliability, but come on, the 120 series LandCruiser Prado, it's pushing 20 years old now. Surely something must go wrong with them. I mean, how are they aging? What do they like to drive and live with these days? And should you ever seriously consider buying one? I'll tell you what, before we answer all of those questions and so many more, there is some critical stuff that you do need to know first. This generation Prado ranges from 2003 to 2009. However, in that time, Toyota revised the big 8-seater a few times. Engine-wise, you initially had the choice of a couple of petrol engines and a diesel. However, the 2.7-litre 4-cylinder petrol was dropped with the first update, and the second update swapped out the previous 3-litre turbo diesel for the then new 1KD FTV. And while we're on the mechanicals, the 120 has permanent four-wheel drive with the 2-speed transfer case. However, depending on the model and where you're watching this from, some have a torsion center diff with open front and rear diffs utilizing traction control, while others have a lockable center and rear diff for when the going gets tough. And interestingly, the 120 shares the same suspension components with the Hilux Surf, the 4Runner, and the FJ Cruiser. And speaking of sharing things for our international viewers, the 120 is also the basis for the Lexus GX 470. Not only does the Lexus have extra creature comforts and a more refined driving experience, it's powered by Toyota's wonderful 4.7-litre 2UZ FE V8. But back to the Prado, and let's talk trim specs. Locally, we've had mainly 4 to choose from with a smattering of special editions, but thanks to an enormous aftermarket scene, it's pretty safe to say that on the used market, no two Prado will actually ever be the same. Although this can bring with it a few issues, but we'll cover that when we get into what goes wrong with these. Now, as far as pricing goes, really high kilometre rough examples, they're asking as little as $5,000. At the polar opposite end of the spectrum, pricing tops out at around about $35,000. And this puts it up against the likes of the Mitsubishi Pajero, the Ford Everest, the Isuzu MU-X, Nissan Pathfinder, and even Land Rover Discovery 4. But here's a hot tip on saving heaps of cash when it comes to buying any of those. Compare loans from as many different lenders as you possibly can. Now, obviously this would normally be a nightmare of a job and take forever, but jump on Driver because it's so easy and completely free. Now, to give you an idea of how much money you could potentially save, I jumped on Driver and did the calculations on this very Prado, and the price difference between the total repayment amount at the end of the loan between the cheapest and the most expensive quotes was nearly $12,000. That's amazing. Okay, now, if you're a fan of these things, what I'm about to say is probably going to upset you. I'm not the biggest fan of the looks in standard form. I just think a Pajero is just more visually appealing in standard form. However, fit some sexy aftermarket rims, some all-terrain tires, maybe a few other accessories here and there, and my God, what a difference that can make. Even just swapping out the original chrome front grille for one of those retro-inspired, Toyota word across it, retro grills, it just works. However, you know what sometimes doesn't work? The tailgate door. Now, plenty of owners have complained about this because of the weight of the door and the tyre attached to it and the age of the vehicle. These hinges can just wear out and the whole door can sag and it needs realignment or just the hinges replacing. And also, and this is worst case scenario and it doesn't happen all that often, there are some reports from owners that there can be some cracking along the door seam. Okay, next up, it is unfortunately the paint, and this can be a bit of a common issue on any white Toyota from this period, but the white, especially the pearlescent, it can crack and fade and even peel off. It does seem to impact the earlier models. The later ones seem to have sorted it out like this, but it does happen. And obviously to fix that properly, you're gonna have to completely repaint the car or wrap it, and yeah, that's gonna be expensive. While we're also on the paint, plenty of owners have complained that, and this goes on the later models as well, that the paint is quite thin and can scratch really easily. That's disappointing for a vehicle that was designed to go head to head with the bush. And then we come to rust. Now, this isn't as big an issue for Australian viewers as it will be for viewers in colder climates with salted roads, but rust can be a massive issue here. First place to check is around the seals for the cargo door or tailgate door, around here. More seriously, they can suffer from chassis corrosion, and that can potentially kill the whole car. Look, no matter where you're watching this from, it's critical that you climb underneath and look for any signs of corrosion or damage or abuse. You need to see how the car has been treated. You know what, just go and watch our Ultimate 4x4 Buyer's Guide because it explains everything in detail. And after you do that, make sure you go and get a full vehicle history report because it will tell you if there's any money owing on the car, if it's been written off, if it's stolen. You need to know this stuff. Go to ReDriven.com, you can check it out there, or there's a link down below. Now, like many cars that have a sunroof, if yours has a sunroof, you've got to make sure that all those drainage channels are cleared because if they're not, water can find their way down the A-pillars, in behind the kick panels, and generally soak the ECU. In fact, if your Prado's doing some weird electronic things, it might be a soaked ECU. Just get down there and feel if there's any dampness around the kick panels. Also, while we're on water leaking into the car, check all the rubber seals around these rear side windows because if they fracture, water can get in there, find its way inside the panel, into the boot, and yep, you guessed it, it starts to rust. Now, a few owners mentioned that the OEM pads and rotors can warp pretty easily. They recommend not keeping on the brakes if you're on a long downhill run, and if you have been braking extensively, when you're sitting in traffic, stopped, just take your foot off the brakes. Now, like any vehicle this age with air suspension, the Grande and the Lexus models, they can have all sorts of air suspension issues. In fact, a lot of owners just recommend ditching the air suspension completely and going for a quality aftermarket coil sprung setup. Now look, chances are any Prado you're going to be looking at will have some sort of aftermarket accessory fitted to it. Just please make sure that aftermarket accessory is a quality item, it's been fitted professionally, and it actually works. Plenty of owners mentioned that when they bought these, spotlights didn't work, winches didn't work. Just try every function, make sure it all actually works. Actually, just on those owners, okay, a massive thank you to all of the owners groups and forum members that helped us with the research for this video. All this information is what they've given us, especially Jeffrey Kwan. Dude, you are a legend. Thank you so much, mate. Also, another absolute legend, Ben and his family, for lending us this Prado to film. If you've got a car that you'd like to see us feature on ReDriven, why not let us know on the socials, message us there, or let us know in the comments below. Now, common complaints and faults inside. Firstly, dashboards cracking. This is super common, and according to the owners, don't even bother trying to fix it. If you fix it, it's just going to crack all over again. You're better off actually getting a whole replacement dash. The problem with that is we're seeing quotes in excess of $2,000. Actually, just on the price of spare parts, plenty of owners have complained about the premiums that Toyota are asking for OEM spare parts, especially for a vehicle that is still so common on our roads. In fact, some of those genuine parts, they can sometimes cost 3 times more than really high quality aftermarket parts. So before you go fixing it with OEM stuff, just do your homework because there are some bargains to be had when it comes to parts. Next up, HVAC problems. There can be issues with the blend servos and the condensers. It's not a super common issue, but if you're buying one of these, just push every single button and make sure that all of the air conditioning functionality actually works. Specifically, listen out for the sound of like a CD skipping because that might be the blend servo motor on its way out. The good news here is it's pretty cheap and affordable to fix. Next up, the leather on the steering wheels. It can wear pretty badly prematurely. The same can be said for the leather upholstery on the higher spec models. Also, the seat bolsters, the foam, it can just collapse. The easiest way to fix all this stuff is just going to a quality reupholsterer. And as far as the actual resilience of these interiors, in this example, it's got over 120,000 Ks on it, which I know in Prado land is barely anything, 2008 GXL. And the wear and tear is fantastic. The fabric on the seats still feels excellent. There's still texture on the steering wheel and on all the plastics around here. It's kind of soft touch as well. It's not all hard and scratchy, but it's just so resilient. It's wearing really well. It is used on a daily basis as well. And obviously each Prado is going to vary from car to car, but in this, yeah, really good. Even the way everything feels, like all the switchgear and everything you actually use, there's nothing fancy about it. It just feels purposeful, like it's never ever going to break. Now, as far as the actual vibe and feel in here, it does feel large, but it feels substantially smaller than a 200 or even a 100 series LandCruiser. A little bit more compact, not RAV4 compact, but for me, it's pretty much the perfect feeling of space and size. As far as the ergonomics go, look, there's not a lot of adjustability. Most of these only have a tilt adjust steering wheel. There are telescopic ones out there, but the higher and later spec models, not a lot of adjustability to the seat, but the fundamental design is really good. I got comfy in here in no time. I think you could spend thousands of kilometers in here and be totally comfortable. As far as practicality goes, really good sized glove box with a little shelf up here. You've got a spot, I don't know if it's specifically designed for your phone, but your phone fits really nicely there. It also has this and this, which might just be an ashtray, and that'd be a bit gross because smoking is disgusting. In saying that, anytime we criticize smoking, smokers tend to have a bit of a tantrum, so we won't talk about it. 2 cup holders here with a removable divider. Massive, oh, that slides back and forth, armrest slides back and forth. This is huge. That is an enormous cubby hole there, so lots of your crap can be stored in there. Terrible door pockets. I don't even see the point of having these. They're really only good for things that have 2 dimensions. Spot for sunglasses up here, and I think that's it for practicality. Nothing under there. Oh, no, nothing there. Nothing under the seats. It's okay for practicality. Now, as far as what stuff you get, all Prados come with windscreen wipers, but as we alluded to before, the cost of OEM parts, and in this case, wiper blades, can be absolutely ridiculous. So instead, do what we do and get yourself a set of WiperTech wiper blades. They're super easy to order online, easy to fit, and they wipe perfectly. And if you buy them by that link down there, you're going to get 15% off and free express shipping to your door. But elsewhere, when it comes to the features, when it comes to the bare basics, so we're talking the earlier GX models, you're going to get a 6-speaker stereo, remote central locking, and all the usual stuff that you'd expect. Interestingly, the GX received a larger fuel tank from the 2004 update. The GXL, it adds things like alloy wheels, cruise control, and from the 2006 update, 3-zone climate control. Then beyond this, prior to 2006, the VX, it adds dual zone climate control, wood grain trim, and from 2006, leather upholstery. And finally, the range topping Grande, it adds sat-nav, but it is bloody terrible, a rear view camera, powered sunroof, and from 2006, Optitron instrumentation and added warning features. Optitron, very fancy. Now, obviously you can forget about things like Apple CarPlay or Android Auto or even Bluetooth being fitted as standard, but you can do what Ben has done with this Prado and fit all that sort of stuff with a quality aftermarket system easily. Now look, so you don't have to remember all of those features, let alone all the things that can go wrong with these, we have listed everything out in our free Prado cheat sheet over at ReDriven.com. It's basically the ultimate used Prado buyer's guide. Okay, now in the back seat, I'm exactly 20 centimeters taller than the star of the Devil Wears Prado, Meryl Streep. This is in my driving position, and it is so comfortable back here. Good amount of knee room, good amount of foot room. Transmission tunnel isn't too tall, so even if you are in the middle, there's still a good amount of space. Windows are massive, so it feels airy and spacious. Even seat comfort, really, really nice. And these are adjustable as far as angle goes to a whole bunch of different levels. I was not expecting it to be this comfortable in the back. It's bloody lovely. Could spend hours back here. Now, as far as wear and tear in the back of this particular example, hardly any. Honestly, it feels almost new. Even the fabric just feels great. There are no scratches anywhere. This is used on a daily basis back here, but you'd never know. Excellent wear and tear. Then as far as features and practicality in the back, in this you get your own climate controls here. You've got a little spot sort of for your phone, sort of fits nicely there. Map pockets, rubbish door bins, and they're kind of hard to get to as well. Pull down armrest with 2 cup holders, and air vents for the air conditioning, and that's about it for practicality. Also, I think these are ashtrays, but there's no cigarette lighter, so we're just going to call these little cubby holes for dust and fingernails and bits of sleep out of your eye and Lego and old food. Also, I just noticed these come out so they're easy to clean, or you can just throw them away when you quit smoking. Now, as far as getting in the third row, this is legitimately my first ever attempt at this. Pull the lever, lift that up. That couldn't be any easier. And then as far as space goes, put this back where I was sitting. Yeah, okay, well, like, understandably, hang on, I've got to get this headrest up, there we go. Okay, understandably, not really designed for adults back here. Technically, you can fit 3 people across here because there is a seatbelt and allocation for it. They'd want to be small humans. There's no way 3 adults would fit back here with any kind of comfort at all. It's not too bad. For kids, perfect, but adults, nah. As far as wear and tear in the third row of this car, hardly any. I don't think these have ever actually been used. There are a few scratches and whatnot because I'm technically sitting in the boot and the boot gets used. And then as far as practicality and features go, you've got your own air vents, cup holders. There's actually sorted practicality back here. Now, as far as practicality in the boot goes, if you've got all 3 rows in place, typical for an SUV like this, there's bugger all actual storage and cargo space back here. But pop these away, and there's loads of room in the back. Also, interestingly, this third row can legally be removed. A lot of 7-seat, 8-seat SUVs, you've got to leave these in place, but yeah, legally you can just remove these completely. And then with the second row stowed away, stacks of room. And I tell you what, this is quite comfortable. We can have a little picnic. Now, while we're talking practicality, we do need to talk about towing, and the 120's towing ratings are pretty respectable for what this vehicle is. But let's not go getting carried away. It's critical to consider the Prado's gross axle weight limits. Not to mention, while the figures might indicate you can tow something that's 2.5 tons, to tow something that's heavier than the tow vehicle itself is just asking for trouble. Don't do it. Now look, we don't have time to delve deeply into all the towing specifications in this video, but what we've done instead is added a link to a LoadMate article. It does a fantastic job of explaining all the details. And look, before you go tearing me apart in the comments, yes, you can do GVM and GCM upgrades to these things, but I know from experience, doing that often just ruins the car's handling and ride quality and just driving characteristics in general when you're not towing. I've driven them, they're terrible. Now, while we're on the topic of sensible things, let's talk safety features. Obviously, being a 2-ton four-wheel drive, it's going to win the battle of physics if it hits anything smaller than itself. But to take you through the safety features that you can expect, to make this more entertaining, we're going to cut to me doing a voiceover of the safety features, but it's going to be a race to see if I can do the voiceover before folding away all the seats and putting them all back in place. You ready? Here we go. At the bare minimum, so we're talking the earliest GX models, the safety features you can expect include 2 airbags, seat belts, windows and doors. The GXL, it adds ABS, electronic brake force distribution and brake assist, while the VX and Grande models, they added an extra 4 airbags plus electronic stability control, traction control, hill start control and downhill assist control. Look, overall base models can be sketchy in terms of safety features. The more recent and higher spec models, they're much improved. Okay, common faults and complaints when it comes to the driving experience. The first thing we need to talk about, unfortunately, is fuel consumption, especially with these 4-litre petrols. Look, obviously it's silky smooth, it sounds great, it's refined, great amount of power, but according to owners, yeah, it does love a drink. Okay, after trawling through owners groups and forums, about the very best that anyone is seeing in these is about 11 litres per 100 kilometres. In saying that, we doubt very much that many normal humans could ever see that figure. At the other end of the spectrum, some owners are claiming they're seeing averages of 20 to 22 litres per 100 kilometres. That is intense. Granted, those Prados are fitted with mud terrain tyres, all of the accessories under the sun, and are often driven in anger. About the average that you can expect to see is sort of between 15 and 16 litres per 100 Ks. Now, this might lead you to believe that you think you're better off buying a diesel instead, but the thing is, when you take into account the extra servicing costs and maintenance costs of a diesel, you might not actually be any financially better off. But besides that, we really couldn't find many other common complaints about the driving experience. A few owners mentioned that in standard form, there could be a bit of extra ground clearance for off-roading, but that's really splitting hairs. Honestly, the vast majority of owners just mentioned how invincible these things feel on the road, and yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it doesn't even feel that big to drive in suburban and built-up areas. Okay, it maybe lacks a little bit of refinement compared to some of the competition, but for me, that's a positive thing. I want an SUV like this to feel tough and rugged. Now, that's not to say this isn't refined. It is. There are hardly any rattles or squeaks or weird noises. The suspension on this one is so compliant and so impressive. I'll even go as far as saying it has some steering feel, and that's rare in vehicles like this. Look, it just feels invincible to drive, like it will just go on forever and can just tackle anything in its path. And again, isn't that what you want from a vehicle like this? However, we have come to that part of the video where reality can smack you in the face, because we do need to talk about mechanically what can go wrong with these. I can't tell you about, because I'm not a qualified mechanic, but you know who is? It's Jim.
I'll start with a 3-litre diesel here. Look, the early ones had the 1KZ, the later models had the 1KD, both 3-litre, and the bottom ends of these engines are pretty much the same thing. The 1KZ, it's got the old school fuel pump and separate injectors, simpler injection system and somewhat easier to repair and cheaper to repair too. Now, in saying that, it's a good idea to do injectors in them every, 150,000 Ks, or definitely no more than 200,000 Ks if you want to look after it. And speaking of looking after it, make sure the cooling system is really flawless on these things. If they have an overheating event, the head will crack. I mean, the heads can crack even without an overheating event, but if they overheat, the heads crack and the head is scrap after that. You just absolutely have to replace the head, which is not cheap. And on the maintenance thing, it's a good idea to do glow plugs every 100,000 Ks as well. Overall, yeah, they are pretty reliable. One common issue that can kill them is a blocked oil pickup, and that can be a result of poor servicing and just time as well. If the pickup's blocked, it causes oil starvation and it kills the engine. Now, the 1KD, that's the later model with the common rail injection system. It too has problems with blocked oil pickup. Now the reason for that is the earlier versions had a injector design where if the injector seals leak, that just leaks all the carbon and crap into the crankcase basically and blocks the oil strainer prematurely. And once that is blocked, you have oil pressure issues and the engine is dead. The later models did revise the seal and move the O-ring on the injector so it's less likely to leak, but they do still leak. Now injectors on these are expensive to do, and again you really should be doing them every 200,000 Ks or so if you really want it to last. And those injectors also get somewhat unfairly blamed for the chronic piston cracking these things have. Yeah, dodgy injector can cause a piston failure, but the piston failure in these things, which is a pretty common problem really, is more of a flawed design of the piston. And there's really not much you can do about it. If it's going to crack, it's going to crack and fail. I should also say extreme towing and modifications will also likely cause cracked pistons. Other less serious issues, sometimes they have some turbo complications, but overall the turbos are fairly reliable. And just in the servicing and looking after these things, they have a little map sensor filter on them. So if you're servicing one of these, that's what it looks like there. I don't know if that's going to focus. It's like a $10 part, and if that is blocked or leaking, the map sensor doesn't get a correct reading, and then the air-fuel ratio is not right, which can also cause long-term engine damage as well. So yeah, for a very cheap part, well worth doing. Other maintenance items, the timing belt is due every 150,000 Ks or 7 years. And just on the servicing and the maintenance, if you are buying one and you're unsure of the service history, sometimes they can be fine, but it's money well spent taking the bottom part of the sump off and having a good look at that oil pickup. It can definitely save you from a broken heart. Now the V6, the 1GRFE, very reliable engine. They have a timing chain and not a timing belt, so unlikely to have issues with it unless it's had a terrible service history. The ones that fail nearly always have missed a bunch of services. And sometimes that poor servicing, again in these, can cause a lot of just carbon and crap to build up in the sump, and that blocks the oil pickup and that kills the engine as well. So typically if the thing's been well serviced, you're unlikely to have issues with it. Sometimes with age they do have head gasket complications. Now especially if the cooling system's never been flushed, the multi-layer steel gasket just kind of rusts away. Another issue they have, which is not that common, is some of the little steam or ports or the coolant ports in the head can sort of erode, and that presents like a head gasket issue as well. So you can put head gaskets on it and you can still have an issue. It's not a super common problem, but something definitely to look out for. The thing to look out for on the petrols is the radiator. Now they've got a plastic outlet like every other car on the market. Now the plastic fatigues over time and that top outlet can snap off, just breaks off. The way these are set up and the way the coolant temperature sensor works is quite often, unless you smell it or see it, you don't know you've lost all your coolant until it's too late. Just a pro tip, if you have one or if you're servicing it or if you own it, whatever, that top radiator, if the top of it is brown, replace it. It's that simple. Now the transmissions on these, they're all pretty good actually. The higher mileage ones can have some issues with bearings and synchros, but if they've been well serviced, they are pretty bloody stout. And it's the same with the autos. The autos do not like heavy loads and they tend to overheat. Now, if you have one and you're towing or doing sort of extreme forward driving, an oil cooler is a must, because typically overheating is really all that really kills these transmissions. Now, no matter what engine and combo transmission you have, servicing is the key here. On these, you're not going to get the 3 or 4 or even 500,000 Ks, which they are capable of getting. You're not going to get that unless it has been serviced fastidiously. Another common problem you're going to see with these is issues from the previous owner and possibly some of the shitty mods. If you're looking at one, just try to make sure the mods have been done properly. Servicing is very important too, but if it's had a bunch of shitty mods, just look at another one. Not worth it.
Okay, so after all of that, why shouldn't you buy a 120 series Prado? Well, firstly, they're getting pretty long in the tooth. The cost of OEM parts can ask a premium. Plenty on the used market are well past their primes, and the notorious Toyota tax might have you questioning just how much value for money you're actually getting. However, find the perfect example, pretty much like this one. Make sure it checks out with all the critical pre-purchase inspection stuff, and all of those potential negatives will just pale into insignificance. As a number of owners put it, with the right maintenance, a good 120 will be a seriously robust unit for a very, very long time to come. And even with the premiums used Toyotas often ask, it still offers some of the best value for money in this category. It is seriously, it's one of the very best value for money 4x4 Tourers available on the used market. Look, it's not perfect by any means, but It's bloody awesome. Although, if you are in the market for something like this, you really should also check out one of these as well. But that then raises the question, if you weren't to buy this or this, what would you buy? Let us know in the comments. We'll see you next time. Firstly, dashboards cracking.
Another issue you're possibly going to face is the, oh, why can't I talk? God.